Get ready to get your questions answered by financial advisors. Learn how to put more money back in your pockets regardless of where you're starting your financial journey. With your host, Hannah Mitria. Luis Barajas, I am excited to have you on here. I know you're the first Latino CFP in the country, and you work with a lot of famous Latino entertainers in the music industry and all the other industries. So you get to spend your days on the East Coast as well as the West Coast, since you're located on the West Coast. But share with us what you do and a little bit more about you, Luis.
Well, I'm more of a comprehensive wealth manager and business manager. And what do I do? It can be from anywhere from paying a client's bills, the day-to-day stuff, helping them invest, oversee their insurance, help them buy their homes, help them set up their retirement plans, help them buy their cars, hire their nannies. I mean, pretty much we're the financial CEOs for our clients. And even though we work with anybody pretty much, in the market, more of self-employed professionals as well. It's been something that I've been doing since I was a kid, because of being the eldest of immigrant parents that have come from Mexico. You have to take care of them and you help them fill out the paperwork at an early age, and you're their translator. So all I am doing now is the exact same thing that I did for my parents, 30, 40 years ago.
Awesome. That's amazing. My husband's actually from Nepal, so he's an immigrant. So I really it's close to my heart when I hear people that come here and just all that intertwines of it, and how even though I grew up in America, we never learned finances and how the tax and all these different things work. But, I can only imagine how much harder it would be coming from any other country coming
Absolutely.
to America.
It's complicated enough for people who are born here to speak, and it's their primary language, right?
Yeah.
They're very confused. So, yeah, but I work with a lot of people here. And the assumption is that if you're really smart, then you must know about everything, especially about finances. And I have clients who are husband and wives who are PhDs. And when it comes to finances, they're really intimidated by that. I've got clients right now who I just recently got off the phone with, who's probably making about maybe 8 to 10 million this year, and grew up really poor. And when it comes to finances, I mean, this guy knows how to sing and how to entertain a lot of people, but he has no clue. And so you have to do a lot of hand holding, and you have to kind of talk to them at their level. You always meet a client at their level. You don't try to impress them with all the knowledge that you have. You try to impress them on how you can get the information to them so they can take action.
Yeah, I love that. And so I know you mentioned it briefly about how, you were doing all this stuff for your parents. So how did you get started? What was your background in getting into this finance? Is that what you always wanted to do, or?
Yeah. So what happened was, this is years ago when I was 11 years old. My dad lost 2 jobs. So we were going through a recession. This is back in the 70s. He lost 2 jobs. He had enough money to buy a welding machine. He was a welder. And back then he opened up an ornamental iron shop where you make window guards and fences and wrought iron doors. And so I was 11 years old, and my dad asked me if I can help them fill out some paperwork. It was for a business license. And so I did that at 11, not because I knew how, not because I wanted to, it was because I had to. Mm-hmm. And so my dad opened up became a contractor. And then a couple of years later, my dad got audited. At age 13, the IRS came to my dad's shop and asked my dad if he had filed business tax returns. They didn't. And so I asked the IRS agent if there was some kind of book that I could read. Again, I'm 13 years old, to how to prepare a tax return. He did tell me that I can go to a bookstore and buy a book or get it from the IRS. Remember, this is pre-internet, pre-everything else. I bought a book on how to do a tax return. Back then, you would go to the post office to get all the tax forms. You wouldn't download a PDF. You'd have to go and actually get real forms.
No TurboTax.
and no TurboTax back then. And I went, then 2 years later, we got audited for those returns. And it was in El Monte, California. And my dad and I were nervous as heck. We didn't know what was going on because I had never done a return. And so the lady asked me at the IRS office who had done my dad's tax returns, because I didn't sign them as a preparer, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I said, I did. And she was, well, how would you know how to depreciate a welding machine? And I explained to her, said in the book, it said this, this, and this. And then I go, did I do it wrong? She goes, no, you did it correctly. So she must have felt bad for us because we were poor as poor can be. And long story short, after that, we went down to the parking lot. My dad and I were both shaking. We were both all sweaty from the stress of being there. And I made a commitment to my father that I would one day learn everything there was to learn about business and finance and money and taxes. And so I made it a point to do that. I went to UCLA, got my MBA in finance, became a CFP, became an enrolled agent. And then that's kind of how it started. But it came with more of the sense of responsibility and obligation of having to help my parents out. And from there, I've written like 5 books. I've just finished my 6th book. I've done a lot of work in the Latin communities and underserved communities throughout the country speaking, and then also having my own financial planning firm.
Yeah, that's incredible. It reminds me of young Sheldon. They had a story. I don't know if you watch that show. The same thing happened where he was doing his father's taxes for him. And I think it's just incredible that you were so young, learning how to do this for your family and just that family obligations with each other to really help. And, that really is going to drive our conversation today, where we talk about, you were there helping your father do those taxes and get through that audit, which I can only imagine is not a fun process. And not everybody can do what you did, Louis. We can't all read these tax books. Even with Google, it's hard as can be. So sometimes we need to have our parents go to a financial advisor and direct them in that place. And so let's talk a little bit about, what should parents be looking for? What should you be looking for your parents? Because I think,
well, that's a great point, Hannah. That's a wonderful point you just made. So the goal when I started writing my books and speaking was, I thought we need to get information to the masses who really need a lot of help, but because nobody should basically give an 11 or a 13-year-old child that kind of responsibility. It's just overwhelming and it's not fair. So I said, so how can I drive also people to learn the profession and go into the profession and help people out? So what should you look for? So if knowing what I know, all the good and all the bad in the financial planning industry and the investment management industry and the insurance and industry as well, what would I tell them to look for? So I've always written, I actually had it written down for over a decade. So you're asking me a question that I've been prepared 10 years ago to tell you. But the first one I will share with you, I'm going to share with you about maybe 8 or 9, and I call them the C's of selecting a trusted financial advisor. The first one is their character. Now you can go online and do a background search or look up that individual. If somebody's going to refer you to a financial planner, I want you to look them up. Go through FINRA, go through and look up their background. Have they had anything bad? Have they been sued? So their character is really important, and now it becomes a lot easier. You can research their ADV and read if anything's been done before. You need to know the person that's going to be managing your money or giving you financial planning advice. What's their character? Mm-hmm. The second is I want them to be able to have some credentials, and not licenses as much, whether they're a certified financial planner. If they're going to look for a tax person, a CPA or an enrolled agent, I want them to have some credentials, something minimum. If you're going to be doing financial planning, you should be a certified financial planner, because that tells me that they're dedicated to their profession and they're willing to get it. Some people say, well, it doesn't really mean I'm smarter than CFPs. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that you're dedicated to that profession, that you're willing to go and study and get that minimum designation to enter that industry, right? There's a lot of people out there who are probably maybe better than doctors, but you know what? You still go to an MD who's gone through all the training and education. Yep. The third thing is their compensation structure. Are they fee only? Are they fee based? Are they commission only? What's their compensation structure? How are they getting compensated? Now, are there wonderful, committed, honest, ethical, transparent people who do commissionable products? Yes, there are. Absolutely. But the problem is that my personal belief is that if you're selling anything on commission, sometimes it becomes a little bit more complicated when you're not doing well and you got to push something versus fee only. And, fee only is somebody who's going to charge basically the percent of assets under management, which I think there are actually some conflicts there, or somebody who's just going to charge you a fee to do the work, to do the planning for you. Mm-hmm. But ask them, how are they compensated? And when they're giving you advice, what's the motive? What's driving that advice? Is it to sell a product or to really help them out? So the fourth thing is I go back to is you want them to be comprehensive. So most of the time when I get a client, they say, we just sat down, you asked me a whole bunch of questions, but you didn't come up with a product as a solution. I said, well, products are to be implemented after we figure out what the problem is and then what needs to happen. And sometimes financial products are not the solution. There's other type of products. I've done education planning when the product that I've referred to is family therapy. The product that I've referred to is getting, marital counseling. I've done, when I've done retirement planning, I've referred them to marital counselors instead of putting money in a 401k. So it's really being comprehensive and really asking the questions that are going to help the client get their ideal outcome, not the outcome for me, but for them, right? Having what's called a fiduciary responsibility. What are their communication skills? A lot of people come into this industry and they lack communication skills, and they have to be pretty, emotionally intelligent. And they have to sometimes, clients will tell you stuff that sometimes they want you to hear. Their own ego gets in the way. Are you willing to really listen and find out if you feel that they're not being completely honest with you? And there's other issues that you need to dig deeper. So having great communication skills. I'll give you another C. Actually two, but I connect them. They're called connected and collaborative. Connected means that a lot of times clients come to me and I can't solve all their problems, but I can connect them to an estate planning attorney. So I'm very collaborative. I have the solution and I can guide them. I can be their financial CEO to the person that's going to help them. If they come to me and I need them to buy an insurance policy, I know honest, ethical insurance agents that I can refer to that will end up doing the right type of insurance for them. So what's my circle of support as an advisor? So, I think just kind of one more is how committed are they to their profession as well? I want my clients to have an advisor that belongs to, the FPA or the CFP board, or belongs to, some association wherever they belong to, and they're involved because they're constantly learning and educating themselves. I meet a lot of advisors who never go beyond the minimal education to get their CEs. They do it online and do a class that they need 8 hours every year, and they'll do a class that takes them 2 hours online. They're not committed to their profession. So I want that. So those are the ones, basically: character, credentials, compensation structure, commitment to their profession, being comprehensive, great communication skills, and are connected and collaborative.
Yeah, that was incredible. I wrote all those down. So C's of selecting a trusted advisor. And, if we just jump back to some of them too, like, looking at character, it's so much easier now than maybe it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because now we can just do a Google search.
Absolutely.
Like, we find everything there. And, I love that you talked about credentials, because I used to work in real estate. It wasn't my thing. I loved marketing. That's why I switched. But I remember going to like the different certifications and things like that. And we all looked at them as just like, there's just another letter. It's another like bit of my alphabet that I'm adding on at the end. But I love the way you put it of, how dedicated really are they? It's like the difference between a doctor and a nurse. You want to know the doctor's opinion, even though the nurse is going to ask all the questions, you're still going to trust the doctor first.
Yep.
So, and then one thing I wanted to talk about, and you mentioned products, and it's really interesting. So when I first went to a financial advisor, the very first thing they start talking about is life insurance. And I was like, what? I remember my husband has this full call set up for us where he's like, we're going to go talk to the financial advisor and like kind of get stuff in place. And we get on the call and I'm like, well, what's this call about? And my husband has no idea. He's not telling me anything. And he goes, I don't know. We get on. He's like, okay, so we need to figure out how much money you need to have in life insurance. And I was just like, what? I was confused because this is a financial advisor. So what are your thoughts on that? Like,
yeah, well, you know what, here's the thing. So it used to be that people say, well, financial planning is not about a product. It's about a process. And a process, like, you do the financial planning, you gather information, you analyze the information, you give, but it really is about people. And at the end of the day, the goal is, do you want to have clients for the long term, to be able to look them in their eyes and say, did I do what's best for them? Right? Absolutely right. That's why I said earlier, if I would have met with you and your husband, one of the questions that I'm going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, how's your marriage, believe it or not? Because, if your goal is that you want to retire and be financially independent, the goal is, we're talking about maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, right? Or longer. Are you still two going to be together? And it's really funny because sometimes I'll ask that question and most women they're blunt with me. They're super honest. The guys are oblivious to what's going on in their marriage. Sometimes they'll say, oh, we're at a level of 7 or 8 or 9. I mean, things could be better. And the women, I've had women tell me, oh, we're level 5 or 6. And go, oh, shoot, where do you think you could, would have to be at what level to contemplate divorce? And I've had to tell me, well, level 4. So I said, oh, man, instead of putting money away for the future in some kind of product, let's go through marriage counseling and decide if this thing's going to work so you can be around, because I don't want to be saving money for the divorce attorney. Yeah. So, it gets down to what's the ideal outcome. And so, again, I go back to, you really weren't talking to a financial planner. You were talking to an insurance agent disguised as a financial planner. And that happens a lot in this industry. And so that's what you're trying to avoid, right? And that goes back to a lot of it is the person's character, how ethical they are. Now, the problem is I've been doing this for so long that in the industry, I see a lot of young people who believe that the very first product should be maybe insurance because they've been told to believe that it's the best thing for you. So they're trying to do something good. But what they don't realize is that if they don't sell insurance, they're not going to get paid. And it goes back to the compensation structure, right? We went from maybe they had good character, but it's the compensation that's forcing them to do that. I don't know if you heard about everything that happened to Wells Fargo people just a few years ago. So if you Google Wells Fargo, they got sued because they were incentivizing the people at the branches that if they opened up more accounts, they would get bonuses. So they were opening up accounts like you can't believe that they shouldn't have, and sometimes opening without the client even knowing. And so they got into a whole world of hurt. So that's why I'm saying the compensation structure is something really important and it matters a lot.
Yeah, I love that. And in case my husband listens, we're 10. But how would you go about asking? I feel like, money at the end of the day, this whole podcast is about money and finance and things like that. And it's also one of those questions that it's a little tricky. So how do you just straight up ask, how are you getting paid from this? Or is that a conversation a financial advisor is going to tell you ahead of time? Like, hey, I'm a fee-based or commission?
They can, but it could be manipulative, right? The manipulative conversation is, don't worry about it. My company pays me. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, you see a money going into annuity product and, you see that you put $100 and you put $100. But the problem, if you surrender that annuity, you're not going to get any of that income there because they paid it out to commissions, right? Or the same thing with a cash value life insurance policy or whatever. No, you need to ask. So that's great. And what is this going to cost me? And the problem is there's no such thing as a free lunch. And I will always say that if the person tells you that it's not going to cost you anything, then you know that that's not necessarily true, right? Mm-hmm. And so you want a client to have, what I would ask him is, the first question that I would ask, part of the character was, are you a fiduciary? I think I mentioned it, but I didn't mention it strong enough. Are you a fiduciary? And can I get that in writing? Which means that's different than most people. So there's this fiduciary level and then there's suitability level, right? And so standards. So a fiduciary standard says that I must put you and your husband first and make sure that you understand everything that we're going to do for you and what it's going to cost you and everything else. A suitability standard is different. Is a product suitable for you? Meaning that if you walk into a Honda dealership and you want a big Ford truck, well, we don't sell Ford trucks here, but let me sell you something from Honda. I get it, but there's nothing here that's going to solve the problem that I have. Mm-hmm. But all I can try to do is sell you something, from the Honda dealership, where if I were a fiduciary, say, hey, you're not going to find it here, but let's go to the Ford. Let's go get a Ford truck. Across the street, there's somebody out there selling Fords there. So that's a fiduciary standard. So people have to understand that. And yes, you must protect yourself and ask these questions because a lot of people will refer you to their financial planner. Mm-hmm. The problem is that they don't even know that their financial planner is not doing something good for them as well. Right?
Yeah. So I love hearing it like that. Because, fiduciary is something that all financial advisors talk about in some way or another, but it's almost like, the fiduciary is like, we're going to do whatever you need done, like the best thing, whether that's you going somewhere else, where suitability is just, we're good enough. It's that contentment.
That's exactly right.
Awesome. Well, I love that. And I love all of the C's of selecting a trusted advisor. And when we go back to thinking of our parents and, things like that, we talk about life insurance just because that's where a lot of people go. But when we think about that and the retirements and things like that, what are those fears that we should really be looking at about money being passed down? Because I know I've heard a lot of it now of how the IRS comes in to try to take it. So what are some things that we can do to kind of alleviate those fears of the IRS taking all the money?
Well, the IRS won't take the money unless you're doing the right. If you're doing the right thing, you don't have to worry about it. Most people, the chances of getting audited are slim to none now. only if you're making a ton of money, then you should have professionals. You should have CPAs helping you get everything done, right? The fears are, if I get old, what happens to my money? What happens if I lose it? Will I outlive my money? Mm-hmm. The problem with most people, their biggest fears is that they're going to outlive their money, not that the IRS is going to take anything away from them, right? And then how do they transfer the money that they've earned and worked for an entire lifetime to their children? Mm-hmm. And they don't do proper planning. And that's one of the goals, is to leave a legacy and to have your family, your children better off than you do, right? Mm-hmm. And that does require proper planning. The problem is that there's a lot of superstition around getting an estate plan done. There's a lot of ignorance when it comes to how to transfer money to family members. So, for example, I work a lot in the Hispanic communities, and what they do is they own a lot of real estate. And when the parents get older, they transfer the title into the name of the kids, or they add their kids to their title. Mm-hmm. When they realize that if they would have put it in a trust, I live here in California, and they pass away, they get a step up in basis. What does that mean? That means that if my dad bought his home in East Los Angeles for $30,000 and it's worth right now $800,000, and he passes and he's got it in a trust, he leaves that property to me at a value of $800,000. But it's like, if I would have bought it for $800,000, it gets stepped up to that valuation. Mm-hmm. And I can sell it, or I can move forward, but I can sell it. And if I sell it, there is no taxation, or I can continue keeping it, renting it out, and then leave it to my children, and it gets a step up in basis there, and no taxes ever paid. And you're building a legacy for generations thereafter. Estate planning is something that's really super important to most people. In fact, I don't really work with any clients who are not going to get an estate plan done, because I know how hard it is to come from poverty. I know what it is for my dad. My dad worked his butt off, and he didn't amass a fortune, but he amassed enough that he's going to leave his children well off, because he worked really hard. And so my dad has a 6th grade education, right? But my dad's lived the American dream. So I've made sure that we sat down with an attorney to protect his estate and make sure everything goes through. And then outliving your assets, a lot of people feel that they're not saving enough, or it's too late to save. And that's not true. Mm-hmm. Years ago, Hannah, I used to meet with people, and everyone wanted to retire at the age of 55. Everyone, like, I don't want to work anymore. And I go, now everybody's thinking about working till age 75, because they don't have enough money. And also, people are living longer, right? When they created the Social Security Act, you would get Social Security at age 65. Well, but you would live, the average life expectancy was like 66 for a man. So you would get Social Security for about a year or two. Now, you don't know when you're going to pass away. You can live until age 95. A lot of people are making it to 100. Mm-hmm. So the goal is, that's where planning comes in. It's important to do planning. Just focused on putting product away is not important. You have to know what that number is. And especially now that, you're starting to see inflation come again. We haven't seen this type of inflation for 40 years. It really eats up the spending power, right? The purchasing power of your dollar. So planning is as important now as ever been, or even more.
Yeah. Kind of already went into the next question I was going to ask, like, are my parents, is it too late for my parents to start planning? I think a lot of people start thinking that, like, is it too late for retirement at this point? Like, yeah, am I just going to have to take care of them forever?
No, actually, let me just share with you. The thing is, we always think about people planning for money, but everyone has a financial plan. Hannah, if you never met me before and you never have met a financial planner, I would say you already have a financial plan, but the problem is you just haven't put it in writing. Mm-hmm. No, there's a lot of planning that could be done for people who are getting ready to retire. Like, when should I take my Social Security check? How much money do I have? What type of investments do I have in my 401k? Should I rebalance it because I'm getting older? How long will it last me? Do I need long-term care insurance at this point? Do I, everyone needs planning at different levels. When you're young, like you're thinking about, I don't know if you have children or not, but what about education, that the kids are going to get, they're going to become 18, they're going to go to college, or, you want them to go some kind of school where they're going to get further training. Everyone needs planning. It's never too late, and it's never too early, right? And I say, when do you start financial planning? I think, I know people can talk about becoming financial, the financial literacy at younger ages. But really, my experience has been that nobody really pays attention to their money until they're responsible for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
When they have to pay rent, when they have to make their own car payment, when they're still living with mom and dad and they don't make a rent payment, you can't talk to anybody about that. It goes one ear out the other. It's a very consumptive stage. They're just spending all their money. It's rare. And again, somebody could listen to this podcast and tell us that, well, that's not me, but that's the majority. You're the exception to the rule. But everybody needs planning at one time or another, but not one time or another. Everybody is planning, period.
Yeah. And it kind of leads me to a question I was thinking of was like, so as I do have a daughter who's 14, and as a parent, just like, when are those times that you should start looking at different kinds of investments? Like, when they're first born, what kind of investments or what kind of things should you be planning for them? When they're middle school stuff, because there's college, there's health, there's so many things that you need to plan financially for your child. And what are some of those stages that you'd recommend to any parent listening that is ready to invest?
Well, you have to take a look at what do you want? What's your ideal outcome for you as you and your husband? You may not be making a lot of money, or you may be making a lot of money. And then what do you want to do? Some people, come to me and say, Louis, I really want to start saving for my college education, but I pay for all of it myself, and I want to help my kids out. And some people say, I want to pay 100% of it. And some people say, you know what, if I do that, I'll make my kids entitled. They're not going to want to work with, I want the kids to have skin in the game. I'm willing to pay for half of it. So we go into these, education calculators and find out what colleges they would want their kids to go to, and what it would cost and how much they should put away. So beyond just the numbers, it's the qualitative, like, what's your experience? My dad, when I grew up, didn't have money to help me to go through college, and I paid for it all myself. And I also know parents who have tons of money, but their kids are very entitled. They don't have good grades. They don't have self-esteem, and they've never been to college. The money's just been sitting there. So at the end of the day, I can use that money for my retirement or whatever, or buy a car or a vacation home if they didn't go to college. But the goal was that you wanted your kid to be educated. So it's not so focused so much on product. It's going, what are you trying to accomplish, and what's your kid's needs? What's his personality? What's her personality? What's your self-esteem look like? So all these things are really super important, because at the end of the day, I've got clients who are multimillionaires who've gone through divorces. Their kids don't talk to them. I've also got kids in the barrios who've gone through divorces and the kids don't talk to them. And they're both lonely in both homes, one in a, multi-million-dollar house, one in a poor house. But at the end of the day, they're still not happy, right? Mm-hmm. And money should be used as a tool to live a better quality of life, because when it's all said and done, I've never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse. I've been to a lot of funerals for my clients, and I've been there, and nobody talks about their accolades. Nobody talks about all the money in the bank. Nobody says when they're giving the eulogy, they don't show their financial statement. Look at how much my dad had, look at what he amassed. They talk about, was my dad a good person? Was he there for me? Did he love me? Did we love each other? Those are the important things. Again, money should be used as a tool to live a better quality of life. And as long as we keep that in perspective, then, we can do a lot. And that's the most important thing.
No, I love that. And it's something I know we live by a lot is, we can always make more money. We can make more experiences. And so we've always looked at money in that, more qualitative way of, how can this money work for me? Like, we don't hoard money, and maybe we should sometimes, but it's always been like, I was watching a memory that showed up on social media of 2016, us taking a whole road trip around the world. And honestly, I was just getting out of college at the time. And so my husband was supporting all of us. So I remember maxing out credit cards to get there. And now we've, come so far to be able to pay all that off. But it was like, I couldn't have done that had I been trying just to save money. And I think money does need to work for us. Right. And I definitely grew up in a house where we didn't have money. Like, that wasn't a thing. I always
say you need double vision, right? Double vision. You got to keep one eye on the present and one eye on the future. And you have to enjoy yourself now, because you don't know, especially now, like, we just been through COVID. We don't know when we're going to get COVID and get sick and die or whatever. But the point is that one eye on the present and one eye on the future, because the future comes faster than you think, right? And you remember the day that you had your 14-year-old child. You remember the day you were in the hospital and gave birth to the baby, and now you're looking at your kid who's probably taller than you at this point. And so time flies. And so the kids grow up, and yes, they will need things. You have to decide and take a look at what are the big key moments in your life that you want to be there for your kids? A lot of people that I have will say, I also want to save a little bit of cash to buy my kid a car when they start college. I want to help them out with college, but I'm never going to have enough money to pay for all of it. But there are strategies, right? If you don't have all the money, the kid can go to a junior college or community college first and then transfer. So there's strategies. Again, at the end of the day, the goal is not for your kid. In this case, the example we're using, the goal is not for you to have enough tuition money for your kid to go to college. The goal is for your kid to graduate from college. Mm-hmm. And how that happens, we'll figure it out, right? And it might be a 529 plan. It might be an UGMA account. It might be whatever. But the point is, the goal is that you want to see your kids successful. And if something were to happen to you, you know that they can take care of themselves. And if you leave them just money but nothing else, then they'll just go through it because they didn't work for it. Most people don't appreciate anything if they haven't worked for it. And again, there are exceptions to that, but that's the majority of the time.
Yeah. I love that you look at it as we all think, my kid to go to college, but it's not. You want your kid to graduate college. Otherwise, it's a waste of college, all of it. And, looking at even when you talk to people, you mentioned how you ask them to rank their marriage because, we work with actually a lot of family lawyers as well. And so we see the divorce process, and my parents divorced, I would say, because of money as well. And, it's such a strong thing that if we're not looking at all those different things, those are the things that are going to set us back, and the money is going to be taken anyways. So looking at that quality of life. And one thing I was listening to is I was listening to your podcast that you were on earlier, and you talked about financial dignity. And so I really wanted to talk about that and kind of dive into it. So what are those things you can do to ensure that your parents are going to get financial dignity when they're going to an advisor?
Well, yeah. So let's just define the term financial dignity, right? So financial dignity means that you have health insurance. So in case you have an emergency, you don't end up in an emergency room because you don't have health insurance, right? This day and age, it's a little different because there's more health insurance available. Financial dignity is if you're a single mother who's working hard, that you're able to afford a decent car that's not going to break down if you have to work two jobs and then you got, somebody taking care of your kids and you don't know if that car is going to make it because it's constantly breaking down. Financial dignity is making sure that if you're taking your kids to a restaurant, that you're not looking at the prices of that restaurant and see, you have your kids order whatever they want to order if, because it's not too expensive. You want to live a dignified life. Financial dignity, I will share with you, Hannah, there are a lot of communities where family members die and they have to have car washes or sell T-shirts or whatever to raise enough money to bury their own children or bury family members. That's not financial dignity. We want to have money saved up for that as well, because we know that's going to happen. So how do you give your parents financial dignity? Is I go back to, those are the conversations that you have to decide what are they trying to accomplish? Everybody has financial goals. Not everybody wants to be super wealthy. Not everybody wants to drive a Bentley. Not everybody wants to drive a Mercedes-Benz. Not everybody wants to live in Beverly Hills or name a place in the United States, the Hamptons. Everybody wants to live in a home where, the rain doesn't come through the roof or the ceiling. And so it's saying, what's the quality of life that I desire or I deserve to have at a minimal? And how do I work on that? Now, I would say that 98% of the time when I'm doing other podcasts or other talks with other industry professionals, they always talk about a budget. You should do a budget. I actually work with a client how to work with them to create more value and thus earn more money. Because a lot of people, there's a lot of myths that in certain communities, if you're poor, the kids are still buying $500 tennis shoes and really expensive stuff. But most of the time, that's a myth. The parents are living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, they've cut everything they possibly can. The problem is nobody's taught them how to make more money or how to become more valuable. And so that's the things that I've worked with other people who are working, blue collar workers, regular workers, who don't have dignity, right? The other dignity is working with an advisor who's going to treat you just as important as a client that has $1 million with them. I always get, because my clients now that I work with, they came from the body, but I have clients that are super wealthy entertainers and athletes. And they say, oh, I must be your poorest client or whatever. And I said, no, you're my only client. And I let them know that, I'm going to treat you the exact same as I'm going to treat you like the athlete or whatever making, we're looking at a client right now that just got a $150 million contract. And I'm going to treat that client exactly the same that I'm going to treat that client that resembles my parents. Right. And that's what financial dignity is. You have to work with people who are willing to have that kind of heart. And there are a lot of people like that. So that's always been my heart, because, again, every time I see somebody that doesn't have a lot, I want to treat them with that kind of financial respect or financial dignity. We have an axiom in our firm called turn the turtle. And that turn the turtle says that if you're walking down the street and you see a turtle that's upside down, flip back, that turtle's not going to be able to flip itself over. Stop what you're doing. Help them, flip them over, help them out. And so we get calls in our office all the time that maybe people who might not be able to become our clients, but we still guide them. And because we call that financial respect or financial dignity. Treat them like people who they deserve to be treated, right? And you never know. You just don't judge a book by its cover as well. And you never know. But at the end of the day, Luis Barajas has learned as much from my impoverished clients as from my wealthy clients. And I've learned a great wisdom from everybody. If you listen to people, they have their own stories to tell you. And I've learned from them. So that's what financial dignity really means.
Yeah, no. And I am in Fort Worth, Texas, and I used to work at Best Buy, and we'd have people come in, their overalls completely covered in dirt. And typically those are the people that were going to buy everything for the house in one shot with no credit card, because we can't judge a book by its cover. We're also different across the world. And just because, you have a fancy suit doesn't mean anything. So I love that. I love the whole concept of financial dignity too. I think that's amazing. And a lot of it goes back, like, as you're talking about it, kept reminding me of the C's and, like, making sure they're communicating and that they are committed to their profession, because I think that's a big thing of, if they're committed to this, then they have that drive to help people do these things. They're not.
Yeah, there's a lot of wonderful people who just, have their own stories, who come from, poverty, or stories, people who really care about other people. And you just got to find, you're going to find an advisor who really understands you and is willing to listen to you. Again, most advisors are trying to figure out how to sell their product, right? And we have to focus not on the process as well, but on the people. And I will share with you, that's when you have people, I've had clients now for 35 years who've never left me. And because at the end of the day, they become like family, and they become, they become a special part of what you do for them. It transcends beyond the money.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And so I know you said you wrote 5 books, the 6th one coming out. So if somebody was to go look you up on Amazon, they're like, I can only buy one book. What's that one book? And not Amazon even. Hopefully they come straight to you. But what is that one book?
The thing is this, if you're Hispanic, if you're Latino, the book that I would ask you to buy, which is the one that I wrote from my heart, was The Latino Journey to Financial Greatness, which is Overcoming Limiting Cultural Beliefs About Money in the United States. That's the book. If you are listening to me right now and you're not Latino, there's a book that I call My Street Money. I came out on CNN when President Obama was going to run for president the first time, and they had me on CNN, and they brought me Luis Barajas. We come to talk not about Wall Street, but we come to talk about Main Street. And they asked me that question, and I said, listen, I don't know about Wall Street or Main Street, but I can tell you about my street. Mm-hmm. And that's what I wrote the book, My Street Money. It was about normal, hardworking people who needed, really good financial advice, in which nobody was trying to con them or motivate to buy something. And it's basically the anglicized version of the Latino Journey to Financial Greatness. And if they're into business, I know this is going to sound strange, but I wrote a book called Small Business, Big Life. Mm-hmm. But I updated it and I wrote it called Small Business, Big Life for Women. And that's my updated version. I couldn't update the Small Business, Big Life because it was doing so well. So I updated it, created for women, because most of the time that I was doing workshops and seminars, it was women that were coming up to me, because the whole purpose of a business is to give you a life, not to suck the life out of you. And most women that had started businesses had other responsibilities. They still would take care of their husbands. They still would take care of their children. They still had others, and they couldn't be working 24/7. So the book shows people people who've already opened up a business, how to create the systems and the structure to give you more life. And so, again, if you're a business owner, Small Business, Big Life for Women, My Street Money, and if you're Latino, the Latino Journey to Financial Greatness.
Awesome. And I'll make sure.
I cheated, Hannah. I cheated.
Why'd you cheat?
I cheated because you should give only one. And I said, okay, but there's different.
We give one for each audience member that's listening, and we'll make sure all of these are on the podcast. So if you don't even have to go search for them.
And I did a coaching book. I did a coaching book called Overworked, Overwhelmed, and Underpaid. And it was because I was talking to so many people who were actually making decent money, but they just are overworked and overwhelmed. And they were underpaid because they were working so many hours that they didn't have time to spend time at home with their children. And so, yeah, that's more of a coaching book. So.
All right, awesome. And so, Louis, tell everybody who's that ideal person that you serve, it would make the most sense to come and work with you, and then how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, my clients now tend to be a lot of either people in the entertainment industry. There are people who are self-employed professionals. I get a lot of doctors and lawyers. I get, pretty much anybody. I'll share with you mostly people who have families, like husbands and wives who are working hard, have careers, are really busy. They're not do-it-yourselfers. They need somebody they trust to kind of help them manage their finances for their family, kind of be a financial CEO for them, help them put together their estate plan. So families, I tend to work with kind of older couples, people that are already now in their 40s and have kids that are 14, 15 years old, or people that are getting near in retirement, and they're kind of a little bit nervous about where they should be at this point. Do they have enough? So those tend to be the clients that I work with.
Awesome. And how can they reach out to you?
It's easy. They can go to, they go to my email. The email is Louis, Louis at labarajas.com. You know what? At this point, I've gotten so much media. They actually just Google my name, right? LOUISBARAJAS.com. LouisBarajas.com is where they can find me. But if they Google me, they'll find me. And then if they want to find the books, just go to Amazon and put the last name Barajas, and all my books will pop up.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. You gave us so much information. I love the C's of selecting a trusted advisor. And I think it's so important for our families to be able to find that right person that's going to fit with them. And it's even more important sometimes for your parents to be able to find that, because I know, especially as parents get older, people can start taking advantage of them. And so having this guide and this method of how to make sure that their money is being handled by the right financial advisor is fantastic. So thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Yeah. Thank you for the privilege. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Virtual U.S. Financial Advisor Podcast. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or via RSS so you'll never miss an episode. We'd love a rating on iTunes, or better yet, tell a friend about the show, which will help us grow as well. If you want to learn from any of our financial advisors, head over to our website, virtualusfinancialadvisor.com, to learn more about each financial advisor and connect with them personally. Be sure to tune in next week to get more advice from the expert financial advisors. See you on the next episode.